The pizza delivery guy who became a crypto billionaire. What if I told you that a 22-year-old college dropout who delivered pizzas to pay rent just created something worth $400 billion that could destroy the entire banking system? What if I told you that this same kid, who was so poor he had to choose between buying food and paying for internet, was recently offered $50,000 for his worthless computer code and turned it down because he thought it might be worth more someday? And what if I told you that traditional banks, governments, and financial institutions around the world are now spending billions of dollars trying to stop what this pizza delivery guy created in his tiny apartment? This is not science fiction. This is not a movie plot. This is the true story of Vitalik Buterin and how he went from being a broke college student who wrote about Bitcoin for $5 per article to creating Ethereum, the second most valuable cryptocurrency in history and the foundation of what experts call the future of money. But here is what makes Vitalik's story different from every other tech success story. He did not set out to get rich. He set out to solve a problem that every expert said was impossible to solve. And in the process of solving that problem, he accidentally created something that could make him the richest person on earth. By the end of this story, you will understand exactly how a 22-year-old with no business experience built technology that threatens trillion-dollar industries. You will learn why banks and governments are terrified of what he created, and you will discover how recognizing problems that others ignore can create wealth beyond imagination. But most importantly, you will see how someone who cared more about changing the world than making money ended up positioned to do both on a scale that previous generations could never have imagined. Let me take you back to where it all began in suburban Toronto, where a skinny kid with thick glasses was about to revolutionize how money works forever. Vitalik Buterin's origin story reads like fiction, but every detail is documented and verifiable. Born in Russia in 1994, he moved to Canada with his parents when he was 6 years old. His father, Dmitry, was a computer scientist who struggled to find steady work in his new country. His mother worked various jobs to help support the family. The Buterins were not poor by global standards, but they were certainly not wealthy. Vitalik grew up wearing second-hand clothes, eating simple meals, and understanding that money was something you had to be careful with because there was never enough of it. But what Vitalik lacked in material advantages, he made up for with intellectual curiosity that bordered on obsession. By age 4, he could add 3-digit numbers in his head. By age 7, he was programming simple computer games. By age 10, he could speak 4 languages fluently. Most importantly, Vitalik was fascinated by systems, how they worked, why they failed, and how they could be improved. He would spend hours analyzing everything from video game economics to government monetary policy, looking for inefficiencies and contradictions that others missed or ignored. This analytical obsession led him to discover Bitcoin when he was 17 years old in 2011. At the time, Bitcoin was still considered a fringe experiment used mainly by computer nerds and people buying illegal items online. Most traditional economists dismissed it as fake money that would never amount to anything significant. But Vitalik saw something different. He understood that Bitcoin was not just digital money. It was a completely new way of organizing economic activity that did not require traditional banks, governments, or financial institutions. The more he learned about Bitcoin, the more excited he became about its potential to solve problems that had plagued monetary systems for centuries. Inflation caused by government money printing, transaction fees charged by banks, delays in international transfers, and the ability of governments to freeze or confiscate people's money. However, Vitalik also noticed something that bothered him. Bitcoin was limited in what it could do. It was excellent for storing and transferring value, but it could not easily support more complex financial applications like loans, insurance, or automated contracts. This limitation sparked an idea that would eventually be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. What if someone created a new type of blockchain that could run any kind of program, not just simple money transfers? But first, Vitalik needed to understand the cryptocurrency space much more deeply. So he made a decision that seemed crazy to his parents and friends. He started writing articles about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies for a blog called Bitcoin Weekly, earning 5 Bitcoin per article. At the time, Bitcoin was worth about $1 each, so Vitalik was earning $5 per article, barely enough to buy lunch. His parents thought he was wasting time that should be spent on schoolwork or finding a real job. His friends thought he was obsessed with something that would never amount to anything practical. But Vitalik was not writing these articles for the money. He was writing them to learn everything possible about how cryptocurrencies worked, what problems they solved, and what limitations they still had. Through his writing, Vitalik connected with other young people around the world who were equally fascinated by the potential of decentralized money. He began collaborating on projects, contributing to open-source software, and developing a reputation as someone who understood cryptocurrency technology at a deeper level than most people twice his age. In 2012, Vitalik co-founded Bitcoin Magazine, which became one of the most respected publications in the cryptocurrency space. This gave him even more opportunities to interview key figures in the industry, analyze new projects, and think deeply about what the future of money might look like. But the more Vitalik learned about existing cryptocurrencies, the more convinced he became that they were missing something crucial: the ability to support complex applications that could automate financial services without requiring human intermediaries. He began writing detailed proposals for how a new type of blockchain could support what he called smart contracts, programs that could automatically execute agreements when certain conditions were met, without requiring lawyers, banks, or other traditional middlemen. For example, a smart contract could automatically release payment to a freelancer when they completed work to specified standards, or automatically pay insurance claims when certain weather conditions were verified, or automatically distribute investment returns to shareholders based on company performance. The potential applications seemed endless, but building such a system would require creating an entirely new blockchain from scratch, a project that would take years of work and might never succeed. Most people would have been intimidated by the scope of such an undertaking, but Vitalik was 19 years old, had no significant financial obligations, and was more interested in solving interesting problems than building a traditional career. So in late 2013, Vitalik published a white paper describing his vision for Ethereum, a world computer that could run any program and support any kind of decentralized application. The response from the cryptocurrency community was immediate and enthusiastic. Developers, investors, and entrepreneurs around the world recognized that Vitalik had identified a crucial missing piece of the cryptocurrency puzzle, but enthusiasm for an idea and actually building that idea are completely different challenges. Vitalik needed to assemble a team of world-class programmers, raise money to fund development, and solve technical problems that had never been solved before. This is where most ambitious projects fail. Ideas are easy. Execution is extraordinarily difficult, especially when you are trying to build something that has never existed before. But Vitalik had several crucial advantages that he did not fully appreciate at the time. First, his years of writing about cryptocurrencies had given him credibility and connections throughout the industry. Second, his technical proposals were detailed and mathematically sound, proving that he understood the challenges involved. Third, he was not trying to get rich quick. He was genuinely motivated by solving technical problems, which attracted other talented people who shared that motivation. In early 2014, Vitalik assembled a core team of 8 co-founders who shared his vision for Ethereum. The team included experienced programmers, business developers, and cryptocurrency experts who had been following Vitalik's work for years, but they still needed money to fund development. Building a new blockchain from scratch would require paying salaries for programmers, renting office space, and covering other expenses for at least 2 years before the project could generate any revenue. Traditional venture capitalists were still skeptical of cryptocurrency projects in 2014. Most established investors considered the entire space too risky and speculative for serious investment. So the Ethereum team decided to try something that had never been done before. They would raise money by selling Ether tokens that would be used to power the Ethereum network once it was built. This fundraising approach, later called an initial coin offering, or ICO, was controversial because investors were essentially buying tokens for a network that did not yet exist, based on nothing more than a white paper and the reputation of the development team. Many people warned that the Ethereum ICO was too risky for ordinary investors. Critics argued that the team might take the money and disappear, or that the technical challenges of building Ethereum might prove impossible to solve. But Vitalik and his team had spent months detailing exactly how they planned to use the funds, publishing regular updates on their progress, and demonstrating working prototypes of key Ethereum components. When the Ethereum ICO launched in July 2014, the response exceeded everyone's expectations. In just 42 days, the project raised over $18 million from more than 10,000 investors around the world. This gave the Ethereum team enough funding to work full-time on development for several years. More importantly, it created a global community of people who were financially invested in Ethereum's success and motivated to help with testing, promotion, and application development. But raising money was just the beginning. Now Vitalik and his team had to actually build what they had promised, a task that many computer science experts considered impossible, or at least extremely unlikely to succeed. The technical challenges were enormous. Ethereum needed to be secure enough to handle billions of dollars in transactions, fast enough to support real-world applications, and flexible enough to run programs that had never been written before. For the next 18 months, Vitalik worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, debugging code, solving mathematical problems, and coordinating with dozens of programmers around the world. There were moments when the project seemed hopeless. Critical bugs would emerge that took weeks to solve. Fundamental design decisions had to be reconsidered and rebuilt from scratch. Key team members burned out and left the project. But Vitalik never lost focus on the ultimate goal. creating a platform that could support decentralized applications that would make traditional financial intermediaries obsolete. In July 2015, after nearly 2 years of development, Ethereum officially launched. The network began processing its first transactions, running its first smart contracts, and demonstrating that decentralized applications were not just theoretical concepts. They could actually work in practice. The initial response was cautiously optimistic. Cryptocurrency enthusiasts were excited about Ethereum's potential, but most mainstream observers remained skeptical that it would ever attract significant real-world usage. However, within months of launch, developers around the world began building applications on Ethereum that had never been possible before. Decentralized lending platforms allowed people to borrow money without banks. Prediction markets enabled betting on future events without traditional bookmakers. Digital art platforms allowed creators to sell unique digital items without galleries or auction houses. Most importantly, these applications were not just experiments. They were processing real transactions involving real money from real users around the world. As word spread about what Ethereum made possible, demand for Ether tokens began increasing dramatically. People needed Ether to pay transaction fees on the Ethereum network, so greater usage of Ethereum applications led to greater demand for Ether. In early 2016, Ether was trading for about $1 per token. By early 2017, it had risen to about $10. By mid-2017, it had reached $100. By the end of 2017, Ether briefly touched $1,400 per token. Vitalik, who had retained a significant portion of the original Ether supply, suddenly found himself worth hundreds of millions of dollars on paper. The pizza delivery guy who had once written articles for $5 each was now one of the youngest billionaires in history. But the real validation of Ethereum's importance came not from its price, but from the attention it began receiving from traditional financial institutions. Banks that had initially dismissed cryptocurrencies as irrelevant began investing billions of dollars in blockchain research. Technology companies like Microsoft and IBM began offering Ethereum-based services to their enterprise customers. Government agencies began exploring how they could use Ethereum for voting, property records, and other public services. Most significantly, central banks around the world began developing their own digital currencies based on principles that Ethereum had pioneered. The technology that Vitalik had created was now influencing monetary policy at the highest levels of government. By 2021, the total value of all applications built on Ethereum exceeded $400 billion. The network was processing over 1 million transactions per day and supporting everything from decentralized exchanges to digital art marketplaces to virtual worlds with their own economies. Traditional venture capitalists who had initially ignored cryptocurrency projects were now investing billions of dollars in Ethereum-based startups. Major corporations were integrating Ethereum into their operations. Even conservative institutions like insurance companies and pension funds were allocating portions of their portfolios to Ether and other Ethereum-based assets. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Vitalik's success is how he has chosen to handle his newfound wealth and influence. Unlike most tech billionaires who focus on accumulating more wealth or building business empires, Vitalik has remained focused on solving technical problems and advancing the development of decentralized technology. He has donated hundreds of millions of dollars to pandemic relief, life extension research, and other causes he considers important. He has refused numerous opportunities to cash out his Ether holdings for traditional investments. He continues to work full-time on Ethereum development, despite being financially secure for life. Most importantly, Vitalik has used his platform to advocate for values that extend far beyond making money: financial privacy, resistance to censorship, and the democratization of access to financial services for people around the world who have been excluded from traditional banking systems. Today, at just 30 years old, Vitalik Buterin has created technology that processes over $1 trillion in annual transaction volume. Ethereum has become the foundation for an entire ecosystem of decentralized applications that employ thousands of people and serve millions of users around the world. But Vitalik's impact extends far beyond the current value of Ethereum. He has fundamentally changed how people think about money, contracts, and economic organization. He has inspired an entire generation of entrepreneurs to build applications that could not have existed without the foundation he created. Most remarkably, he has proven that someone with no traditional business experience, no wealthy connections, and no initial capital can still create technology that influences global finance by focusing on solving important problems rather than chasing short-term profits. The technology Vitalik built in his early 20s is now being studied by central banks, implemented by Fortune 500 companies, and used by people in countries where traditional banking systems have failed or excluded them. And this is just the beginning. Ethereum continues to evolve with new upgrades that will make it faster, more energy efficient, and capable of supporting even more complex applications. Financial experts predict that within the next decade, most financial services will operate on decentralized platforms similar to Ethereum, rather than through traditional banks and financial institutions. If these predictions prove correct, Vitalik Buterin, the pizza delivery guy who once earned $5 per article writing about Bitcoin, will have played a central role in the most significant transformation of the global financial system since the invention of paper money. So what can we learn from Vitalik's incredible journey from broke college student to potentially the most influential person in finance? First, the biggest opportunities often come from solving problems that experts say are unsolvable. Vitalik succeeded because he identified limitations in existing cryptocurrency technology and refused to accept that those limitations were permanent. Second, knowledge and reputation can be more valuable than money when pursuing ambitious projects. Vitalik's years of writing and research gave him credibility that attracted talented collaborators and convinced investors to fund his vision. Third, focusing on creating value rather than extracting profit often leads to greater long-term wealth. Vitalik built Ethereum to solve technical problems, not to get rich, but solving those problems created more wealth than any get-rich-quick scheme could have generated. Fourth, the most transformative technologies often seem impossible or impractical to most people when they are first proposed. Vitalik succeeded by maintaining conviction in his vision, even when experts dismissed it as unrealistic. Finally, true influence comes from empowering others rather than controlling them. Ethereum has created value by enabling thousands of other people to build applications and businesses, rather than by centralizing control in a single company or organization. Today, when central bankers discuss the future of money, when technology executives plan new products, and when entrepreneurs seek funding for financial applications, they must consider how their plans relate to the foundation that Vitalik Buterin built. And it all started with a curious teenager who noticed that existing cryptocurrency technology was not as powerful as it could be, and decided to spend years of his life building something better. Your next breakthrough might come from recognizing limitations that everyone else accepts as unchangeable facts. The question is, are you willing to spend years building solutions to problems that most people think are impossible to solve?